Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming here and finding a way. I think probably the wayfinding could have been improved a little bit. Let's see if this works. Yes. So I'm going to talk about a project I've been doing with colleagues, and I think one of the colleagues, Ollie, is also in the audience. Dynamic geodemographics, which is modelling the impacts of underlying trends on travel behaviour. So I'm just going to say a bit about why we're doing this project, what the challenge was, how we approach solving that problem, and then talk a little bit about how we've looked at different trends and classified them. I'm going to introduce the idea of a geodemographic segmentation, a system dynamics model, and then talk about what next, and that does potentially involve you. So what was the challenge? Why are we doing this? So the background is, there's quite a lot of trends out there which we all heard about, bits about. So there's things like aging society, aging population, and young people driving less, or at least delaying when they get a driving license. And then things like, shared mobility and Airbnb, all sorts of odd things going on, but actually very little understanding or clarity about how they affect transport. And that means it's quite difficult to think ahead, quite difficult to forecast. Quite a lot of the work we do, we have to think ahead, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And that's really hard if you don't know what's going on with these trends. So that's the problem. And the solution is an R&I project. And in this R&I project, what we're doing is we're looking to understand what these trends are, and then build a framework model so that we can look at a way of exploring these trends and testing out different assumptions and different parameters and variables and see how they affect these trends. And in terms of specifics, we're going to specific elements of the work. So starting off with collating evidence out there, collating all the reports that have been provided and written. We have done some primary research. We've done an online survey. We've collected views from a range of experts through a Delphi survey, and what we will be doing next is a system dynamics model. As I say, one of the things we've been doing is collecting research evidence, that's published reports, but also we've been really keen to collect the very latest available statistics. And this chart helps to illustrate why we want to do that. So you'll see the last couple of years, the amount of travel has been increasing. And yet, when we looked at some of the reports that were written, they were talking about trying to explain a reduction of fraud in travel. That was just a few years ago, and now things are completely different. So the question is, which trend is right? Is this a bubble? Is things going up now permanently, or is it going to go down again? So it's trying to understand why these things are happening. What we're trying to do. We've undertaken this primary research, and that involved, a decent sample of people, 3,000 people, and this talking to experts. And we've done a first round of interviews, and what we're looking to do is a second round and potentially involve all you with that. So we've looked at around 30 different specific trends. And that's quite a lot to cope with, and quite a lot of them interact with each other. So we've grouped those into what I'm calling super trends, and there's about 9 or 10 of those. And then what we wanted to do with those is classify them in terms of how certain or uncertain we are about those trends and what their scale of impact is. And on the next slide, I'll sort of show how that pans out. But this diagram here shows one of the things we've been doing is looking at not just sort of average factors, average trends, but what's the range of factors, what's the range of variability, how uncertain are things. So we're looking at both those factors. So we're not just assuming there's a central case, we're also looking at variability. And these are these super trends kind of mapped out on this map of impact on travel demand and uncertainty. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to flag up a couple of sort of the extremes. So population growth, that's relatively known. We're kind of relatively sure about population growth. I mean, there's a range on that, but it's relatively well known. And that definitely has a big impact on transport. In fact, historically, that's the single biggest factor for why travel demand has grown. At the other extreme, they've got autonomous vehicles. We know virtually nothing really about how that's going to impact on transport. But we know it's going to have a big impact. So that's right at the top there. And then you've got this other sort of set of trends here, which are really interesting trends about the growth of things like price comparison sites and getting instant feedback and the way that consumers buy and purchase things. That's quite uncertain, but also it actually doesn't have that much impact on transport. It has some impact on how people purchase and things like what types of tickets they might buy, but it doesn't have a big impact on the amount of travel. So just introducing the idea of this geodemographic segmentation. So what a geodemographic segmentation does, it classifies places and people that live within them. And it's a very well used, very well known technique, which actually was originally, the first one was Acorn, and that was originally used for looking at social deprivation. And now it's more famously or infamously used for sort of marketing purposes and sort of targeted marketing. But we're using a system called the Output Area Classification, which was developed by UCL and ONS, Office of National Statistics. So it's an open source product. But what we're using it for is to take into account the fact that people are different, and that are different depending on where they live, and that particularly is affected by the availability of things like, in a particular area, how good the transport is, what people's family circumstances, the sort of housing, and sort of ages and so on. So there's a very close relationship between these segments and travel behaviour. And then finally, where we're moving to is a system dynamics model. And what we're going to be using that to do is look at how we can project trends. So we can take, we know what's happened. So we can look at taking different assumptions about how past trends are going to move forward and look at how they cycle through and how they interact, the trends interact with each other. And we can use Vensim software to do that and create this system dynamics model. Okay, so next steps. So the first thing is we've actually got a lot of information now. We've done a lot of this desk research, we've done this primary research, so we want to share the results. Next, we're going to do a second round, a further round of looking at getting feedback from experts such as yourselves. And the way we'll do that is actually to provide a summary of what we've found out so far, and then get that informed feedback. And then we'll develop this system dynamic model. And I think what we're thinking of is what we'll do then is demonstrate this model by selecting car trends, effect on car travel, and how these various trends affect that, and look at different scenarios. And these scenarios here are taken from the Future Mobility report that was recently published by the Office of Science. Okay, so I don't know how long I'm doing for time, but maybe there's a couple of minutes just for two minutes, two questions.
How do you allow for things in there which are, if you like, not disruptors, but actually controlling factors? So, for example, car parking and price. So something doubles the price. It's not a trend. It's a controlling factor that can actually completely change statistically behaviour and all sorts of things. So if you double the price of parking, suddenly it might go down radically. That's not a trend, it's a different thing.
No, you're absolutely right. So the idea of this is to identify how underlying trends are going to affect travel, and then with that background you can then look at how different policies interact with that. So if you see what I mean, so if we say the first thing we'll do, I think, is focus on the trends for car travel. So if the underlying trend, it's been going up, if the underlying trend is that's going to continue to rise, then what we can do is look at, well, how do you, if you want to reduce car travel, how you might do that? And one of the techniques might be to, travel demand management type, parking is parking policy and pricing is one of the ways you might do that. So it's a way of, saying, in the model, you can apply different policies and see how that interacts with the trends. Yeah.
Hello. Could you say a bit more about the online surveys that you did, what that kind of covered, and the sample, kind of who's in the sample?
Yes. Okay. So we use Panelbase as an online panel provider, we stratified the sample using this average area classification, try and make sure it was representative in terms of demographics and where people live. It is an online survey, so you've got to bear in mind that, for some things there's a slight bias towards people that are more technology savvy, if you like. But we're mainly using it to get comparisons between groups and comparisons, trends. And the sort of subjects covered were, about lots of the sort of trends in working patterns, for example, shopping, and use of technology. So a lot of those trends we're looking at. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony.